Hey everybody, this video is called Solomon's Administration, and tonight we're continuing our pass-through study here in the book of 1 Kings, looking at the 4th chapter. So we see that the throne of Solomon is being set up, and now we're going to see those who are appointed to be under his kingship and helping him. So 1 Kings chapter 4 verse 1 through 6 says, "So King Solomon was king over Israel, and these were his officials: Azariah, the son of Zadok, the priest; Elihoreph, and Ahijah, the sons of Shisha, scribes; Jehoshaphat, the son of Ahilud, the recorder; Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, over the army; Zadok and Abiathar, the priests; Azariah, the son of Nathan, over the officers; Zadub, the son of Nathan, a priest and the king's friend; Ahishar, over the household; and Adoniram, the son of Abda, over the labor force." So Solomon was in firm control of all the people, and now Israel's new king was a leader of leaders. And Solomon, he structured his monarchy pretty much like modern day government. As we go through the chapter, you might be like, oh, we still have those. We have things like governors and all that. And, you know, the president, they have advisors and all that today. And Solomon's organization of his leadership is displayed here. And Jehoshaphat, who served under King David in 2 Samuel 8:16, continued as a recorder here. And Azariah actually was the son of Ahimaaz and the grandson of Zadok. And son of means descendants of. And that is one thing you must realize when you study the Old Testament, that just because you see son of doesn't mean that they are a legit biological son. Son also means descendants in the original language of Hebrew. And in David's roster of officials, the army commander came first in 2 Samuel chapter 8 verse 16 and 2 Samuel chapter 20 verse 23. And under Solomon, the priests and other officials preceded the military leader. And the scribes likely prepared the royal orders and kept official records. And the recorder kept and maintained the records of all the important daily affairs in that kingdom. And Zadok and Abiathar served together as high priests under King David. And as we saw back in chapter 2, that Abiathar was removed from priestly service and exiled. But we see that he maintains the priestly title until his death. And Nathan here, it could refer to another man or it could refer to the prophet. It is actually not known here. And it could be that Solomon was honoring the sons of the prophet Nathan as well. And Ahishar was his property manager of his lands and his buildings. So you can kind of think of him maybe as a tax collector in a way, or a tax collector's type's office. Adoram oversaw the transcripted workers of Solomon. And verse 7 through 19 says, "And Solomon had 12 governors over all Israel, who provided food for the king and his household. Each one made provision for 1 month of the year. These are their names: Ben-Hur in the mountains of Ephraim, Ben-Decker in Makaz, Sheobim, Beth-Shemesh, and Elon, Beth-Hanan, Ben-Heshad in Aruboth. To him belong Sochol in all the land of Hepher, Ben-Adinadab in all the regions of Dor. He had Taphath, the daughter of Solomon, as wife, Baana, the son of Ahilud, and Taanach, Megiddo, and all of Beth Shean, which is beside Zertan, below Jezreel, from Beth Shean to Abel Maholah, as far as the other side, Jokneam. Ben-Geber and Ramoth Gilead, to him belong the towns of Jair, the son of Manasseh, and Gilead. To him also belong the region of Argob and Bashan, 60 large cities with walls and bronze gate bars. Abinadab, the son of Iddo, and Mahanaim, Ahimaaz, and Naphtali. He also took Basemath, the daughter of Solomon, as wife. Baana, the son of Hushai, and Asher, and Aloth. Jehoshaphat, the son of Paruah, and Issachar. Shimei, the son of Elah, and Benjamin. Geber, the son of Uri, in the land of Gilead, in the country of Sihon, king of the Amorites, and of Og, king of Bashan. He is the only governor who was in the land. So verses 7 through 19 is one of those wonderful Old Testament sections where you get tons of names that you can barely say. And if you can say them, good for you. I know I'm not good at it. But we see that Solomon, he divided the land into 12 geographical districts different from the tribal boundaries, each supervised by a governor. And, we think of the United States. We have 50 states, and all 50 states have a governor representation. And just on Thursday this past week, we actually had a new governor get sworn in to office. And regardless of what we think of her, I pray, that God convicts her of her sin and her administration does well. But each month, a different governor was in charge of collecting the provisions in his district to supply the king and his staff. And we see Solomon's leadership was creative, and taxes were paid in grain and livestock. I would love to send grain and livestock to the IRS for my taxes. But verse 20-21, it says, Judah and Israel were as numerous as the sand by the sea in multitude, eating and drinking and rejoicing. So Solomon reigned over all kingdoms, from the river to the land of the Philistines, as far as the border of Egypt. They brought tribute and served Solomon all of the days of his life. So a clear expression to the Lord's promise to Abraham in Genesis 22, verse 17. In the early years of Solomon's reign, characterized by population growth, peace, and prosperity, there was a foreshadowing of the blessings that will prevail in Israel when the Abrahamic covenant is fulfilled. In the borders of the kingdoms which Solomon influenced, it echoed the Lord's promise to Abram back in Genesis 15, verse 18. However, Solomon's reign was not the fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenants for 3 reasons. And one was that Israel still only lived in the land from Dan as far as Beersheba. I always get Beersheba and Bathsheba names mixed up, so you probably might hear me flip-flop them every once in a while. Please forgive me. The second reason is Abraham's seed did not inhabit all of the land that was promised to Abraham. And the non-Israelite kingdoms didn't lose their identity and independence, but rather recognized Solomon's authority and brought him tribute without surrendering the title to the lands. And the third, according to Numbers 34, verse 6, the Mediterranean Sea is to be the western border of the land of promise. And that indicates that Tyre was to be part of the promised land. However, Hiram, king of Tyre, was a sovereign who entered into a bilateral equality treaty with Solomon, as we'll see in the next video. In verse 22-23 says, Now Solomon's provision for one day was 30 cores of fine flour, 60 cores of meal, 10 fatted oxen, 20 oxen from the pastures, and 100 sheep, besides deer, gazelles, roebucks, and fatted fowl. In verse 22, it speaks of the daily provisions for Solomon's palace. And this is an exceptionally large daily meal for one man, if it didn't mean his whole family. It would make him a glutton. And, that is a joke. I don't really believe that Solomon got this stuff daily just for himself. I believe that he distributed it to his household as well. And the amount of food could feed approximately 15,000 to 36,000 people. That is how much food is with this flour and all these meats and all that. And fatted oxen are pen-fed cattle, not open grazing cattle. And 1 quart of flour was approximately 55 gallons. Can you imagine to have all that flour as well? So basically, if you break that down, Solomon practically got 30 drums daily of 55 gallons of this flour delivered. And all that meat showed great prosperity in the kingdom. And verse 24-28 says, For he had dominion over all the region on this side of the river from Tiphsah even to Gaza, namely over all the kings on this side of the river. And he had peace on every side all around him. And Judah and Israel dwelt safely, each man under his vine and his fig tree, from Dan as far as Beersheba, all the days of Solomon. Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. And these governors, each man in his month, provided food for King Solomon and for all who came to King Solomon's table. There was no lack in their supply. They also brought barley and straw to the proper place for the horses and steeds, each man according to his charge. So Tiphsah was located on the west bank of the Euphrates, and Gaza on the southwestern Mediterranean coast. And these towns represented the northeast and southwest points of Solomon's influence. And in verse 26, though the Hebrew text reads 40,000, that is most likely a copyright error in transcribing the text, as it should probably read what it says later in 2 Chronicles 9:25 of 4,000. And each man under his vine and fig tree, it was a proverbial expression for a time of peace and prosperity in Israel, indicating safety from both external and internal enemies. And that's seen also in Isaiah chapter 36, verse 16, Micah chapter 4, verse 4, Zechariah chapter 3, verse 10. And the famous stables showed what a vast cavalry he assembled for Israel. And like I said, in 2 Chronicles 9:25, it says that there were 4,000, not 40,000. So I hold to the personal belief myself that the 40,000 was a transcribal error. And Charles Spurgeon, he actually did a sermon based off of 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 28, where he focused on each believer has a charge to fulfill the kingdom of God. And we should be vigilant to perform it and be expectant in being supplied for this duty. In verse 29 through 31 says, "And God gave Solomon wisdom and exceedingly great understanding and largeness of heart like the sand on the seashore. Thus Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the men of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt. For he was wiser than all the men, than Ethan the Ezrahite, and Heman, and Chalcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol, and his fame was in all of the surrounding nations." So the men to the east of Israel, in Mesopotamia, and Arabia, and in Egypt, were known for their wisdom. And Egypt had been renowned for learning and science as well as culture. And Solomon's wisdom was superior to all at home or abroad. And Mahol probably meant singers, an association of musicians who created sacred songs. And as I mentioned in the prior video, unfortunately in chapter 11, we see that Solomon did not keep the superior wisdom that he had. And in verse 31, we see Ethan. And if you go over to the book of Psalm, I challenge you to check out Psalm chapter 89. Ethan actually wrote Psalm 89. And Heman is the author of the psalm before that. If you want to check that out, Psalm 88, Heman wrote chapter 88 of Psalm. And the author names listed are only seen in the text here. You don't find them anywhere else in the scriptures. In verse 32 through 34 says, "He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. Also he spoke of trees, from the cedar tree of Lebanon even to the hyssop that springs out of the wall. He spoke also of animals, of birds, of creeping things, and of fish. And men of all nations and all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom came to hear the wisdom of Solomon." So we see that Solomon is highly respected. He's a highly wise man. He is known as the wise man. And hundreds of Solomon's proverbs have been preserved in the book of Proverbs. And I love the book of Proverbs. I actually read Proverbs every day of the year. And the way I do it is, the first day of the month, I read Proverbs 1. And last day of the month, whether it falls the 28th, 29th, 30th, 31st, I'll read those chapters. And I challenge you in your Bible reading, if you're not reading a proverb a day, go ahead and do it. And you probably notice, if you follow me on Facebook, that a lot of my stories that I post are wisdom that we get out of the book of Proverbs. And I read the chapter of the date, as I mentioned, and one of Solomon's songs is actually a whole book in the Bible, the Song of Solomon, that you probably have read before. In Solomon, he described and taught all kinds of plants and animals' lives, as we see in Proverbs chapter 6. And Solomon acquired an international reputation for his wisdom, and many important visitors came from afar places to learn from Solomon's wisdom, as we're going to see in a few weeks here in chapter 10. And Solomon, he had wisdom to understand the world around him. And how much greater would this earth be today, this world today be, if we would take time to gain wisdom of the world around us. And so to wrap up our video for today, we got introduced to Solomon's officials. We see that Solomon, his leadership is a very organized leadership. And we see that Solomon had 12 governors identified, and we see that prosperity and peace of Solomon in Israel that is under his reign. And we look at Solomon's daily provision, and we see the political stability of Solomon's kingdom. We see that Solomon is famous for his God-given wisdom. And we finished the chapter today looking at the broad knowledge of science and nature that Solomon holds to. And you can see that, like I said, back in Proverbs chapter 6, he speaks of the animals and plants and the wisdom that he is providing. And that's going to wrap up this video for today. And we're going to be moving next into the preparations of the building of the temple. So I hope you have a great rest of your evening. God bless. We'll see you in the next study.